Welcome to our debate about peace in the Balkans, and I would like to focus in this presentation about the Balkan peace narrative, what next year in 2021 has to be done in order to really get massive progress, especially in the relation with Serbia, and make sure that Serbia is joining NATO and the EU and the Euro. And that's obviously in the cadence, first NATO and then Euro and then also the EU as a consequence of the first prior two big memberships or adoptions. So what is important? We need American leadership on this one. We need an American president who is really ready to make up with Serbia, to start a dialogue, to visit Serbia, to meet with the president of Serbia, and to invite Serbia to NATO. The biggest problem at the moment in the Balkans and in whole Eastern Europe is the Serbian reluctance to join NATO, and this has to be overcome. I hope that President Biden will be elected. He knows already President Vucic very well. And then to invite the President of Serbia to the White House and to invite to come to Belgrade and to make peace directly between America and Serbia to overcome, of course, the past animosities. Because one of the reasons, or the key reason, why Serbia still doesn't want to recognize Kosovo and also doesn't want to join NATO is obviously all the American intervention in the liberation of Serbia. And that must be redefined technically and in the narrative in what it actually was, the liberation of the Serbs. Yeah? On the 5th of October, 20 years ago, Serbia was liberated as a consequence of American intervention. This is a bit painful for some in Serbia who don't see it like this, but it's very similar like Germany was liberated by America, like Austria was liberated by America. There were also a lot of people who didn't see it that way in 45 and 55. Even some are like that today, sadly. Yeah? But ultimately, it's the truth. It was America liberating Germany and the Germans from Nazi terror regime. It was America liberating Austria, and it was America securing Austria and Germany ever since. And this is very important narrative because you can also go to Dresden and say, oh, the Americans and the British bombed Dresden. Yeah, you can do it like this. Or you can say thank you for the liberation for the KZs and for from all the terror regime. And this was basically what America did. Yeah. Obviously, there were a lot of victims also from the German population. But, the question is, as a modern German and Austrian leadership, don't go to Dresden for that. Yeah, it's they go to the Mauthausen and to Bergen-Belsen to say thanks for the liberation. It's very much a choice how you want to present yourself. And this dialogue has to happen together with the Serbian leadership, and this has to happen under a new US administration. And I call on President Biden to go on the 5th of October 2021 to Serbia, to go to Belgrade, meet together, and then really invite Serbia to NATO on that very important historic day on the fall of Milosevic, on the start of European Serbia. There was no animosities, and there is no animosities between America and Serbia. Serbia was an ally of the Allied forces in the First and in the Second World War. Let's not forget it. That was Tito was an American ally in the Second World War. The Serbs were an allied nation with the Americans in the First World War. And let's not forget, also Yugoslavia was from 51 to 86 basically an American ally. Of course, a socialist country, of course, a dictatorship. Nothing good about that, yeah. But it was an American-funded ally. It was not a Soviet proxy. And so, there is a lot of common history to be developed upon. And obviously, the intervention in the Bosnian War to liberate the Bosnians from Milosevic, and also the liberation of all Balkans, Montenegro, Kosovo, and obviously also Serbia in '99. This is something the Serbs have to say thank you. It's very important, and if the Serbs are not ready for that, then it has to be reminded. This is not a alternative kind of things, yeah. You cannot. I always compared the way Vucic has presented it in Nice in '99. That was really very terrible, because imagine the Austrians doing similar events in year '65 in Vienna. And there were many German cities bombed by the Allied air commands, from Dresden to Berlin to Linz. You can go, every major industrial center was bombed very heavily during World War II in order to liberate the Austrians and the Germans from the Nazi terror regime. And the same was done by the US in order to liberate from the Milosevic terror regime. If anybody thinks Milosevic was a good guy, anyhow, there is no EU future for anybody who thinks like that. Yeah, as a state, as a state elite. Yeah. Personally, maybe there are some people, even in Germany and Austria, think terrible things today. We cannot really change that so easily, but it's forbidden, by the way, in Austria and Germany to have any kind of glorification of this terrible past. And in the Serbia, the same has to happen. It's a typical imperial kind of identity crisis, and the Americans have to help here very massively in the next year in order to make this visit possible and to ensure there is a bilateral peace commemoration agenda in the Balkans. I will outline this in this video, but starting very much also the climax, put it like this, and between such a meeting on the 5th of October 2021 between the two presidents of Serbia and of America, and then really make this invitation for Serbia to join NATO, and basically to help then also everybody in NATO to accept this and to fast track NATO membership. The president of Serbia wants to be first in the EU, and he wants an agreement, a promise, a guarantee in case of peace with recognition of Kosovo. Serbia gets then EU member. That can be the consequence of NATO membership. But first it's NATO membership, and this the American president has to make clear with the president of Serbia. And obviously, it's also not necessary that this is a joint summit. It can be, if all are ready, but maybe that's too emotional for the Serbs, yeah? The recognition doesn't have to be a peace summit with handshakes and, all these beautiful things. If that Vucic is not ready, then it can be simply like this, yeah? Bilateral summit with America, and then invitation to NATO, and the recognition of Kosovo can be just, act in the parliament, yeah? It's totally fine, or bilateral letter. If there should be no peace summit, a trilateral, fine, yeah, it can be like this. But of course, NATO membership is then connected with recognition of Kosovo, obviously, and then also with the price, obviously, which the Europeans will be having to ship in, is that Serbia will adopt the euro the same like Kosovo and Montenegro already have since 2002, and also then to make sure that the whole Balkans basically has the euro. So the Europeans give the euro, the Americans NATO, and so the peace is secured between Serbia and Kosovo. Recognition is done, and so it goes towards a very good 2020s, and that will be very good. And now that's basically the concept for how to make peace, and there is no other way. Everybody else who will try, with bilateral meetings, negotiations, yeah. Ultimately, also President Vucic has to get something. He wants his nation to be in the EU. Okay, then let's do first the euro, first NATO, and then the EU. He will be the man to bring his nation towards the West and integrate it into the currency union, into the political union, into the defense alliance of the West. Very good, excellent. Let's help him, but let's help him systematically, positively, and let's help him in the way this really can work. This is not an illusion, this is very concrete, and this is part of the wider strategy I will outline, and also I will give the historic justification how this was done in the past, and how it will be done in the future. And if it's not 2021, because that's too early maybe for the American president to take such big initiative in the new mandate, then it will be 2022 or 2023 or 2024. But it will be like that. And without it, there will be no EU membership for the Serbs. That's good if you want. Then wait. But it will not block the progress of all other countries towards NATO, EU, and Euro. And that's, of course, then Serbia will lose relatively to its neighbor a lot of time. And then, it will be maybe like this, that there will be the necessity for various changes in the situation. That's also possible. If President Vucic is not ready for this, maybe there will be somebody else who has the understanding and leadership. We had several governmental changes in Germany and Austria, and we will have to see. And comparing to Germany and Austria is very relevant for Serbia, and that I will outline also in the next slides. So here comes the basic strategy, that will be the bigger picture of the coming years. That's basically NATO enlargement, EU to join NATO as well. That's of course very important for the American president to invite the EU directly, and to have the 6 neutral countries from Sweden, Austria, Finland, etc., and the 6 countries who want to join NATO. That's of course first of all Ukraine, Georgia, and Kosovo and Bosnia, but obviously Moldova and obviously Serbia as well. Serbia the least voluntary, but in fact also because the political elite really mobilizes the people against that. Once this is changing, once the narrative is explained differently, there will be also a change in the opinion polls. And that's what leadership needs to be. And then I have outlined the Werner Plan. That means basically the enlargement of the Eurozone faster towards the east, and also the adoption of the euro as main only currency in countries who want to join the European Union in the future. That's the new Werner Plan. And then from Ukraine, Georgia, Romania, Bulgaria, and the whole Balkans to have the euro only. I have made several presentations. You can backtrack a little bit on my video feed, and you see all the detailed explanations for NATO, for EU, for the currency, why and how, and I will not go back into all the details, but that's basically, I think, pretty clear. And once this NATO membership is achieved, and once this EU membership and this Euro membership is achieved, or not membership but adoption, then the countries are ready for joining the European Union, and pretty fast if they have filled these 2 conditions. I want to explain that this was exactly the way the Americans organized post-World War II Western Europe. And this was the way the Cold War was won in the confrontation with the Soviet Union. And this is exactly the way also this kind of smaller second Cold War with hostile Russia will be won exactly now in the coming decades. What happened on the 20th of June 1948? The Americans have basically introduced the German mark. Obviously, you can say the Germans have introduced the German mark, but this was an occupied Western Germany, free military occupation regimes, which basically were fooled by the Soviet Union overprinting the occupation mark. And then they said, that's enough, we're not going to take that, we don't fund the Soviet Union. We will do our own currency, and that's what they did. Under great secrecy, the Western Allies, basically the US, printed the money, brought it to Western Germany, and the German mark was born. And from that moment, the victory in the Cold War was just a question of time, because economically the West was outperforming the Soviet Union massively from that moment. That's basically the basis of the economic miracle. Obviously, then came the liberalization of the prices, the market economy, and and a lot of other things. It's not possible to describe everything at once, but the most fundamental and most important was to have, and that's in any economy the most important, that is the currency. And it was stable, it was low inflation, it was a serious currency, well managed, obviously. and it was basically backed by the United States of America. Thank you, USA, for that courage. It was very much perceived as an important thing. It led to the Berlin crisis, to the airlift. It's not that the Soviet Union had this kind of easy printing money policy and the funding of the occupation by the West and the loss of Western Germany taken easily. And this was the basis for the Berlin blockade, for later then the airlift had to be made in order to supply West Berlin, and so on and so on. It was not easy to do it. It was a crisis, but it was well done, basically. And it was the way to win the Cold War. So, and for Western European prosperity. And so then, based on that one, then came this historic moment of the 9th of May in 1950. Basically, it came the coal and steel community. I have focused in that one on Ukraine, but the same is true with Serbia and with the Balkans. What is necessary, because we didn't do this coal and steel community because there was a big laugh left between 5 years after World War II and all the devastation and horrors of this most terrible war in human history. It was not 5 years later a big love lost between anybody in Western Europe after, because it was the same people. The ones alive, they remembered very well the atrocities of the Nazi terror. But obviously it was a new Germany, obviously it was a new enemy. And obviously then it was done to start with coal and steel integration, because these were the defense industries. You cannot wage war at that years without the coal and steel industry. That was for the tanks, for the airplanes, for all the material. So ultimately, to make an economic union of these defense-related industries, of the heavy industries, that was really very important. And so it came that Europe was created. This is the foundation moment, the Schuman Declaration on the 9th of May, 1950. This is what why Robert Schuman is the father of Europe. So we need to work in the same line. And then came only because in the meantime NATO was created in 1949, the Marshall Plan was created. I made several presentations about that one already. And then came the big moment, what to do with Western Germany in the way of defense. Should the former aggressor nation be turned into an allied nation with a mutual defense agreement? Article 5. That was really very courageous thing. Can you believe the Soviet army was standing at the inner German border ready to attack? There's no kind of physical obstacles, no rivers, nothing. You can go straight on to Paris or to the Atlantic within days. And that is, and the Russians have done that, from the Napoleon times, if you want to talk history. But it's very easy to do that, once you are in Eastern Germany. And so the security guarantee by Article 5, not just of the Americans, who were anyhow, the occupation power and in responsibility, but also to take the French into the defense obligation of Western Germany and the inner German border. That was really very difficult. And please, who thinks that this was without the American pressure or American leadership, if you're gonna call, or the Americans basically insisting in Paris that this is happening? In Paris, because NATO was in Paris, but on Paris, that Paris agrees on that. That was certainly not so easy. And many have made already that point. Without the defeat of the French in Indochina, the Dien Bien Phu, that would have never been possible. Whatever, that might be historic a debate. I've made a presentation about it already, but the point is, this was very, very American leadership. It was an American wish to have a secure Europe, a Western Europe, and to have the BRD inside. Adenauer said, of course, he wants to do it. First Stalin and then later the confused leadership of this power struggle after the death of Stalin. They were furious about that one, and they offered neutrality, like they have offered it to Austria, and in Austria was acceptable. Austria was then a neutral country. If it would not have been to Eisenhower and to Adenauer, Western Germany, or maybe German unity would have happened already by then in neutrality, but then obviously it would have not been the Western Europe we know. It would have maybe been a very pro-Yugoslavian kind of scenario in and a lot of instability, and maybe a total different outcome in the Cold War. It was this decision which decided in the World War, with the Cold War. And it was very courageous, and we need the same decision making power and level from the next American president and from the Serbian president. So here comes basically the story what happened afterwards, because the friendship between France and Germany was not in 48, was not in 55. Yeah? This was all American decisions. It came later. The wisdom on that this is necessary came then in 63. And then on the 22nd of January, that's why I have all these famous pictures here lined up. And I want to explain them in these two slides now very much. The first one in the lower, the dark one, dark white, is Charles de Gaulle and Adenauer kissing 18 years after World War II, where Charles de Gaulle, I don't have to go to all the details of his historic background, one of the great personalities of European history, and he was, fighting the war against the Nazis. He was a German prisoner of war in the First World War. He was fighting with tooth and nails against Nazi Germany, and he is kissing or hugging is the better word, in the German Chancellor. This is quite historic. Yeah? At that context, yeah? After all this very much being against Western Germany in NATO, but then they made up again. This is, that was not easy. That was not easy in 63. Yeah? And then this is kind of cannot be over. I always say, when the Germans and French can do that, and that's the whole sense of this present, I say that every single conflict in the Balkans, which I will discuss now, bilateral conflict, if the Germans and French could do it in 63, please, there is no way you cannot do it. Because, that might be the Macedonian-Bulgarian thing is very big. It might be the Croatian and Albanian and Serbian and Kosovo conflict is very big. But do you seriously believe that any of the bilateral conflicts of the Balkans, which still needs to be resolved, exactly in the style of the German and French reconciliation, is more complicated, more historically important, more difficult to resolve than the issue of German-French animosity and enemyship? I mean, if you think that you are so important, that you are more important than Germany and France, yeah, and that it was easier for them and then it's now for you, and then you have really a kind of Tito-esque over-focus on yourself. Because, this is the historic conflict which was the source of the First and the Second World War. I have here this small map of Elsass-Lothringen, Alsace-Lorraine in English. And this is the historic territorial dispute, which since the time of the Sun King, or even much more before, was the question of the Rhine border, of the German settlements on which side of the Rhine, and this border between France and Germany and this borderland, this and the territorial disputes, this has torn Europe apart for centuries. If you really think that the territorial disputes between any of the 7 successor nations or the regional nations around them is more important than this one, and then I cannot help you, because that's your opinion and that's fine, but it's not. Objectively, it was much harder to overcome this historic breaking point of geostrategic dimension, and then the question of the whole 7 successor states and the regional neighbors to overcome peace, because anyhow now all the issues on land are solved. There will be no border changes, there will be no adjustments. It is exactly like it is today. It's anyhow secured by NATO, all of it, and there will be no changes in the future. The only thing is to make up and to accept it and to overcome it, and this is exactly how it was in the year 63. And please study this and learn it, copy it and repeat it. The thing is here, on the 22nd of September in 84, the French president and the German chancellor It was then obviously different personality. It was Helmut Kohl and Mitterrand, and they went to the battlefield of Verdun. And this is the year-long battle between France and Germany in the First World War, where millions, 800,000 people are buried there. How many more were dying? You have to see the Verdun battle. For all who have not heard about it, please go there with a delegation and see how it is. It is really the most terrible escalation, a meat grinder on the battle of the First World War, on this stalemate front. And it was a very small area, and the two nations, for the reason of Alsace, they brought their youth and generations of their youth into this meat grinder, and it was very, very terrible. And then the two leaders of these two countries went to the very same place in Verdun, and Mitterrand, actually, I read it just, he reached out the hand of the German Chancellor, Helmut Kohl, asked him to hold hands at this moment. They didn't say a lot. They just thought, how more powerful can it be as a sign of reconciliation? It was the French who were the attacked ones. It was the French who were most of the victims there. It was the French, the defender, and he reached out. And this is the 22nd of September 84. And that is of course a historic commemoration. And that's why I put these two pictures here in line, and also de Gaulle and Adenauer again, because of the European conviction. And then you have basically also this Alsace map. And then you see, I went through all the bilateral conflicts which are there. Maybe not all, but most of them, especially discussed from Serbia and from Macedonia. And then I have basically decided to go include also Germany and also Austria, but we could also include France and other countries, but these are the historically most relevant for the problems and for bilateral issues with Serbia. And so I went through them. I have designed one very special day in their bilateral history, where a major crime or a major crisis has started or has ended, and basically to make up again. A Verdun kind moment, where it's possible then to overcome the past in order to be ready for a joint future inside NATO, with the Euro, and then ready for the European Union. Because this is necessary. We have to clear the past in order to be ready for a common future. We have all the institutions ready, we don't need new, but we need a kind of agenda of reconciliation and peace, bilateral, and then to move into the European Union and to move very fast. Because, I'm an advocate for Serbia to be in NATO, in EU, in the Euro. I want to make it very clear. I'm very much pro-Serbia, to be successful, to be rich, to be free, to be secure. Absolutely. But, we have to do this agenda, and it's painful for all sides. There are painful concessions and reconciliation processes. It needs a lot of political leadership, but in my view, it's absolutely necessary. 6th of April is of course the day when Nazi Germany attacked Yugoslavia in Belgrade in the year 41. At this very day, it's necessary that the German Chancellor visits Belgrade and makes up a peace agreement, a reconciliation friendship treaty with Serbia, inviting Serbia to NATO, granting the euro to Serbia, and then opening the way for EU future. Obviously with the recognition of Kosovo, that is without question, but to make it this way on the 6th of April, to say sorry for what happened in the past, to make up the past crimes, the symbolism is very important, and this has to happen, and it happened in the German-French case, and it will have to happen in the German-Serbian case. The Serbian-Slovenian reconciliation on the very 27th of June, when there was the war between Slovenia and Yugoslavia in the year 91. And this is very important to really go at this date, then first maybe to Ljubljana, then to Belgrade, to make up to make up what happened in the past, to clear the bad air which was there, and to make sure that we are now allies in NATO, we are prosperous because of the euro, and we are politically united in the European Union. The same for Serbian-Romanian reconciliation. Yeah, it's also very important. On the 20th of February, 1919, there was Serbian-Romanian war about the Banat. That's the region in the north east of Serbia today, because Serbia got it. It's also Banat in Romania. Everything was very contentious in this area because it was all Austrian-Hungarian monarchy, and it was divided. And so there was this war. And the 20th of February is the day for reconciliation for Serbia and Romania in NATO, in the Euro, and also in the EU later. But first of all, in NATO by Serbia joining and Serbia adopting the Euro. So comes then the Serbian-Austrian reconciliation. Obviously, there's no better date than the 28th of July. This is the historic day when the Austrians, Austrian-Hungarian, of course, Austrian Republic is not the successor state of the monarchy, but still, this is the day when there was the start of the war against the Serbs, and it was a terrible defeat anyhow for the Austrians until the Germans came to conquer Serbia in 1915. But nevertheless, this is the moment to say sorry, to visit Belgrade, say sorry for the past, and Serbia and Austria together to apply for NATO. Obviously, Austria still is a neutral country, but that's anyhow totally wrong and unsustainable, because how to be neutral in the European Union? This is totally wrong, because we are also a political union. So political unions have to defend each other. And obviously, this was a Cold War compromise to stay out of NATO, and this is no longer the case. So Austria has to be a role model to join, also Serbia to join, best to join together in the next years to be invited by the next American president. So Serbian-Kosovo reconciliation, NATO membership and the Euro. Obviously Kosovo has already the Euro. Obviously Kosovo wants anyhow to join NATO. So basically that's easy on the Kosovo side. And for Serbia, they don't want to recognize Kosovo, they don't want to join NATO, they don't want to adopt the Euro. And that's something we have to overcome now in the next days and weeks and months. And then on the 22nd of October, that's for 2021 then, to basically the 22nd of October is a very historic day. That was the day when the Serb forces in 1912 have reached Pristina and started with the Serbian forces started to make a genocide. Massive atrocities, yeah. 10,000 of people killed because they didn't want, wanted the land and not the people. And that's basically a continuation of the policy which ended in 99, because the idea was it's nice to have land, but they didn't want any Muslim people and they were ready to kill them. That was 1912, and it has of course softened in some years, but there was this permanent policy to want this land for historic reasons and for having more land, but not the people living on there, to expel them, to make the living conditions for them terrible, to force them to emigration, or to outrightly make a genocide as they have started in 1912. So this has to be clear. This day must also be the day for reconciliation. Yeah? Be sure about the past, and then allows for handshakes, and then allows for recognition. And then, it was also terrible genocides between the Germans and French. Huh? They were able to make up, and they had many territorial complications. Now they found a peace inside Euro, NATO, and EU. This is exactly for Kosovo and for Serbia as well. I've made here a European peace treaty. If it's not for a peace treaty and just for recognition, if they don't wanna ready for this 22nd, good. Just adopt the euro in Serbia as a price for a peace agreement, yeah, and then to join NATO, and that would be basically also possible. Yeah? But of course, it's much better to have a great peace summit and to sign this together, to shake hands. Anyhow, they know each other very well, all the players, they meet regularly, and so it would be no problem. It just needs a change of narrative in the Serbian public to join NATO. Obviously, Croatia is now already very close to Eurozone membership. It will be in 2 years having the euro. Then Serbia and Croatia also have to make up. And the best day for that is the 22nd of April. That's the Jasenovac, that's the concentration camp of the Ustasha regime, the Croatian regime in the Second World War. And this day was the day of the Great Escape, where so many people were executed. And so on this day, that's the Verdun Day of Germany, France. On this day, to go to Jasenovac, the two presidents, to shake hands, to make up the terrible crimes of the past, and to be ready for a joint future in NATO, in Euro, and in the EU. And that's really very important, and that also has to happen on the 22nd of April. And then you have Serbian-Albanian reconciliation. And now, anyhow, there's a great partnership between Vucic and Rama, so that meeting should be less of a problem. The best day for that is the 25th of October, because in 1913 Serbia has occupied actually central and northern Albania, and then on the 25th of October they have left. So that would be a good day to say sorry for all the atrocities of the past, and also to overcome and then to have a joint future in NATO and the Euro, both countries to adopt the Euro and then to join NATO. Then we have Serbia and Bosnian reconciliation in NATO and Euro. And that's, of course, the 6th of April. And that's not the 6th of April 41, but that's the 6th of April 92. That was when the Serbs have basically started the terrible siege of Sarajevo in 92 and shelling that city so long for 3.5 years and trying to put it into starvation, and many crimes have happened there. But anyhow, we have now most of the Bosnians want to join NATO anyhow. The euro is the anchor currency of the convertible mark. So that's relatively easy. It is just that Serbia is blocking via its influence in the Serbian Republic in Bosnia and the NATO membership. But actually, it's quite prepared. So once Serbia changes the narrative about NATO, that can be really the first one to be done. Also, the euro adoption can be done in 3 months in Bosnia. So that's relatively easy. And the visit of President Vucic then in Sarajevo to say sorry for the terrible crimes. That's of course necessary, and to do it like this. Then you have the 15th of June, the EU Day for Serbia and North Macedonia reconciliation. It's also very important. Macedonia is almost ready and will anyhow be in EU very soon, but to make up with the Serbs on both sides is very important. 15th of June, it's the Tikvesh uprising, because the Macedonians really didn't want to be in the kingdom of the Serbs in 1913. They made immediately uprising. So that's a very good moment to remember history together and understand and be ready for the joint future in Euro, NATO. And here we have Serbian-Hungarian reconciliation, also very important. On the 14th of December 41, Hungary annexed the north of Serbia, Vojvodina and Bačka, that region is today Serbia. It was is still today a mixed ethnic region, and they have annexed it, like Russia is annexing Crimea today. The Hungarian fascist regime, they have annexed it on the 14th of December. So that's very good to do an event together. Mr. Orban or Mr. Ada to do together with Mr. President Vucic in one of the Bačka Palenka or in Novi Sad, and then to really remember the past as it was and to ready to be for a joint future inside NATO, Euro and EU. Of course, you know, I understand Mr. Orban doesn't really like the Euro, but I think now the dramatic changes in this year and the economic crisis to come will maybe change his mind as well. And obviously, when everybody else will have the Euro, also the forint and his manipulations will come to an end. Serbian-Bulgarian reconciliation, that's very important. Bulgaria is already in EU and NATO, now very soon in the Euro, so it's already there. Serbia then to make peace. Also, here's the best date, the 17th of November 1915, when Bulgaria was occupying eastern Serbia, and then to make up on this day, maybe in Niš or somehow in a symbolic place in the east of or in the south east of Serbia, and then to make up this peace conciliation. Obviously, this all can only work if there is American will and interest and leadership behind it, because it's so important, and to maybe, how can I say, make it very clear to Serbia this is now happening, and also to not to apologize for the Kosovo liberation, but to explain the liberation of Kosovo, Montenegro, and Serbia as one Balkan liberation, where the Americans, the NATO forces, were ready to fight this terrible terror regime of Milosevic, and to rid the Balkans of this dictator and his lackeys, and so basically to make it possible that a democratic Serbia is happening, and to say thank you for that. Like we in Germany and Austria say thank you for the liberation of our countries from the Nazi terror regime. And this is the parallel, I think, and we will be eternally grateful for the Americans that they were ready to send the young people to die on the European battlefields in order to liberate us, because we were occupied as well by a terrible dictatorship. It was many people in Austria and Germany also not supporting this terrible nonsense and atrocities and horror, and they were also victims, especially same like many of the Serbs were victims, or they had to leave Yugoslavia, they were political prosecuted, they were prosecuted by the UDBA. It was a terrible terror regime, and thank you very much, America, for ending it. And this is necessary to be saying very clearly. We have the same issue still, a little bit different, but also North Macedonia needs to do this bilateral friendship agenda, because we have also to make sure that North Macedonia is in the European Union, even it's ready mainly. In North Macedonian case, it's already in the NATO, so what it only needs is to make peace with Bulgaria and make peace with Serbia, obviously. I have all the states already defined, and also to make peace with Turkey. 15th of October was the day of the ultimatum in the First Balkan War, to make also peace then with Albania, and again, the 22nd of October seems to be the most reasonable date, and then to make peace with Kosovo and reconciliation. Here, the 9th of June would be the best day, the Kumanova Agreement, and also to make up bilaterally the open issues with Greece. Already much has happened with the Prespa Agreement, but now to have Greece really as a promoter of North Macedonian membership, and also make a similar, not an international summit, but really a peace summit in some of the historic sites between North Macedonia and Greece. There was the civil war. There is so much open agenda. There will be certainly. I have actually proposed the 23rd of October, the Vemura Day in North Macedonia. That should be cancelled anyhow and replaced by either a Serbian North Macedonian Greek Friendship Day, or a North Macedonian Bulgarian Friendship Day. There's various options for that one, but it should be a day for regional peace and not for a Vemura terror organization, which was founded in the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, actually in Thessaloniki, today obviously a Greek city, and at that time it was an Ottoman city. And we should not in EU member states celebrate any terror organizations' foundations, but we should celebrate bilateral peace. So remake the 23rd of October into a Greek North Macedonian Friendship Day. And all this should lead on the 1st of May and 24 should be already Albania and North Macedonia, Montenegro in the European Union. And on the 1st of May 29 should be then Serbia, Kosovo and Bosnia in the European Union, so that they can participate in the parliament elections, European Parliament elections, everybody in the year 29, but 3 countries already in 24. So that's basically the plan for the unity of ex-Yugoslavian countries. Now we have 7. If you want to also include in that group Albania it's 8. We have already 2 completed the journey, or Slovenia actually, 1 has only completed fully the journey, and then Croatia is very close to it with Eurozone membership. But everybody in NATO, everybody in Euro, and then everybody in the in European Union, in the political union, in between, to join already the internal market, the single market. That's of course as fast as possible, not to make separate projects, like mini Schengen and everything, but really that's not bad in itself. But the idea is to adopt the European style of governance and to join all this and to have unity and peace by bilateral peace agreements, fast and intensively now negotiated between all the open conflicts, and then also Serbia inside NATO, inside the Euro, not the zone, but to adopt it, and then later, once it joined the European Union, also to join the Eurozone fully. And this basically is the way forward for peace. I know some will say, oh, why not all together? But that's the history. I have made this video about Yugo nostalgia and a lot about the history of the Balkans already. It's now the reality. We have 7 successor states. We now should do our best to bring them all in the same defense alliance, in the same currency union, in the same political union. So there is peace guaranteed for the long term. And this has happened by American support after the Second World War with Western Germany, and and the peace was done between Germany and France by American leadership, and the same is now for all the Balkans necessary. And I appeal to all the political actors in Europe, in the Balkans, but especially to America, to focus on the Balkans and make sure there is peace established now very successfully in the year 2021 started, and then continued towards the long term by NATO, EU and Euro membership. Thanks a lot.